What's up, YouTube friends? Today I'll show you how to make this scrappy rag quilt out of your dad's clothes. It's the perfect gift for Father's Day. It's really easy to whip up, and I'll show you how to do it next. What's up, YouTube friends? Now it's still spring cleaning time here in the sewing room. So in one of my boxes I found a whole bunch of flannel. I have some flower kind that I believe used to be a flannel sheet. I have this checkered kind that was from an old project. And then I have a bunch of pieces that were too small that I just joined together. Now I also stumbled upon a bunch of these squares. Now these were cut out of button-up shirts, and you might remember some of these from previous quilts that I've done. So while pondering some ideas on what to do with these scraps, the scrap shirts and my flannel, I decided today I'm going to show you how to make an easy rag quilt. So the things you're going to need to make this rag quilt are 48 squares of some sort of top fabric. Now I'll be using these button-up shirts. I've also used sweatshirts, t-shirts, or you could just go ahead and use plain flannel if that's what you like. Since I have a bunch of these shirts left over, I'm just going to use these. And I like to cut my squares to 9.5 inches. That's just because that's the size of my ruler. Like I said, you can make this smaller, you can make it bigger, you can make your squares bigger. It's all up to you. You're going to need 48 squares of some batting material. Now I'll just be using all of this flannel. And as you can see, I have different colors here. And a lot of them are just pieces sewn together. That's just fine. Once we cut this apart, wash it a few times and it frays, you won't even be able to tell. And you're also going to need 48 squares of some backing material. Now I had 3 yards of this green that I bought quite a while ago, and I just didn't know what I was going to use it for. I don't necessarily think it goes that well with this, but this is just going to be an everyday throw that we use all the time, so I'm not worried about it. I also think this green will give a nice pop of color for spring. Now this was about 3 yards of flannel here, of this green that I cut up, and it was perfect for the amount that I needed. So if you don't have any scraps here, you could just go ahead and get 3 yards of a backing, 3 yards of a batting, and whatever you want to do for the front. It could also just be flannel. And if you want, I've also used denim for the tops before, and it turned out great. Denim frays really well. You're also going to need your sewing machine and a walking foot if you have one, and your iron and ironing board. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and take one of my backing pieces. In my case it's the green. And I'm going to lay it so that the pretty side is facing down. Now with this solid color it really doesn't matter, but if you have a print, you want your pretty side facing down. Next I'm going to take a piece of my batting here, and I'm going to lay that right over the backing and smooth it out. Now since this has a print on it, you just want to be mindful that when you add your third layer here, that you can't see the print through it. This one's okay, but if it was a lighter print, I'd go ahead and put the print face down towards the back. So now I'm just going to take my third piece here, my shirt fabric, and lay that right on top, just like that. Now I just like to turn it over, make sure everything is nice and flat, and I also like to just go give it a good press. When I have all 3 layers nice and pressed and flat, I just like to take some pins here, and I'm going to stick one at the 12 o'clock, one at the 3 o'clock, at the 6 o'clock, and the 9 o'clock. So now I'm just going to add this to my finished blocks. I'm going to whip up a few more of these and I'll meet you over at the sewing machine. Alright guys, so I'm over here at my sewing machine. I have all of my squares layered together. Today I'll be using a straight stitch and my length is a 2. So what I'm going to do here with my first block, I'm going to start at one corner and I'm going to sew at a diagonal until I get to the other corner. When I've got that done, I'm going to go back and start at the other corner and make a cross right in the center. Now I'll just be chain piecing these together, and instead of doing all 46 at one time, I have these in piles of 8 with 6 per pile. Now you could backstitch if you want to, but all of these seams will be enclosed in another seam. So I'm just going to start sewing. Now for these diagonal lines, you could go ahead and mark it, but like I said, this quilt hides a lot of mistakes, so I'm just going to eyeball it. So now I'm just going to take my other piece without breaking my thread and continue. Now at this point, if you wanted to switch out your regular foot with a walking foot, you can, but this isn't too thick yet. But once I start sewing these squares together, I will definitely switch to a walking foot. So just keep sewing. Alright, so I just finished the first 6 here, so I'm going to break my thread. Alright guys, so I have all 6 in my first stack of squares, all sewed with the first line here, as you can see. So now I'm just going to start in the opposite corner, and sew from corner to create that X right in the middle. Alright, so I'm just going to continue to do that until all 48 of my squares are sewn together with that X. Alright guys, I have all of my squares all finished with the X, so now I'm just going to lay this out. Alright, so I have this all laid out and it looks pretty good to me. Now's the time you just want to make sure that there's no two colors touching, or maybe too many solids in one area and too many plaids or checkers in the next. You just want everything evenly spaced. So now it's just time to sew these rows together. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stack up all of my rows. I'm going to start with the one on the top farthest to the left, and I'm going to lay it on top of the one next to it. Then I'm going to take that stack and lay it on top of the third. Those 3 lay on top of the fourth, and so on and so on. Alright, so I have 8 stacks here, and I just went ahead with some scratch paper. I numbered it 1 through 8, and I'm going to label each of my stacks. Number 1 being the top one. So now that I'm done labeling, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to take stack 1, put it on top of 2, then on top of 3, and so on and so on. And I'll meet you over at the sewing machine. Alright, so here's my pile of 48 squares. I have number 1 on top. So I'm going to take my first square and I'm going to lay it so that the green side is facing up. Then I'm going to take my second square and I want my green side facing down. So now I'm just going to throw a couple pins here. So I threw a couple pins here on the side here, and now I'm just going to take this over to my sewing machine, and with a 1/2 inch to even 3/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to sew right down here. And there's no need to backstitch. So then when I open this up, I know that my third piece goes right here. So I'll just lay it with green sides touching, and with a 1/2 inch seam allowance to that 3/4, go ahead and sew all the way down. So this striped fabric was my first fabric. This blue one is my second. So I'm going to open it up, grab my third piece, and I'm going to lay it so green sides are touching. Now you could throw a couple pins in there if you want to, and just keep sewing. And I'm going to continue to do that till all 8 strips are sewn up. So here's my first strip here, all sewed together. And the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and cut the fringe here in the seams, which I already actually did. I did not have my camera on. So to cut this fringe, all we're going to do is pick this up so that the seam is facing us. With some sharp scissors, I'm just going to come here and I'm going to cut every 1/2 inch or so. It does not have to be perfect. The one thing that you don't want to do is cut through your seam here, but if you do, it's not a big deal. You just want to come back here on your stitch line and backstitch. So over where you cut, backstitch, and you're good to go. Now that I have all the seams fringed, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press my seams open. Now you want to do that to all the seams, and the reason why we're doing that is when we go to sew our rows together, there won't be such a huge bulky knot of fabric at each seam. Alright guys, so here's the finished quilt. Now when I went to transfer my footage over to my computer, I had a corrupted file. So the end of this video, I did not get on film. So after I joined my blocks together, I did the exact same thing with my rows. Now after I joined my rows together, I then went ahead and I sewed a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around the quilt, backstitching at the beginning and the end, and then I went ahead and clipped the edges. Now this is a perfect quilt for beginners because it's so forgiving. Sometimes when you reach the corner section here, you'll see that there's a little bit of a fold or a tuck, but it doesn't matter because once you wash it and it fluffs out, you won't even see it. Now speaking of washing, the first 2 or 3 times that you wash this, you want it all by itself. As our president would say, you're going to have a huge mess. Now of course I use button-up shirts here, but I've also done this with t-shirts, sweatshirts, anything like that. You could even use denim. So just go in your dad's closet, dig out all those clothes that he doesn't wear anymore, and make him this great quilt for Father's Day. I hope you give this project a try. If you like this project, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave me a comment if you have any questions. Feel free to share this across your social medias. Head on over to Facebook for Scrappy's Patch and hit the friend button. And as always, thanks for watching. Happy Father's Day. And I'll see you next time.